Step on it. Yeah, I think so. Oh, it's a nice.
That's why I say that.
That's why I say it.
Yeah, because, but anyway, so I found photographs of them at the AL convention in New York City, 1965.
I think we didn't have a family room. I was sitting in the front seat.
Yeah, at Mount Sinai. And at Mount Sinai.
Yeah.
Right. Well, I attended there too.
Yeah, and they weren't very many people.
Oh, look, they have one of his bonsai trees
Just a
there.
fun person.
Yeah.
He had a great, he was a good teacher.
Yeah.
He had great priorities.
Oh, he gets longer and longer.
And, you know, he's the kind of person who the kind of guy who would be like him.
Yes. Yeah. You know,
Yeah.
I remember
His
having my business with that. He took him out.
underway local family, not his own size.
So he sat me up after he gave me the injection. I wouldn't know it. He says, now tell me the name of all the injections.
Donate them to
No, it's not like someone.
Get out of the house.
Jeff.
So I wrote it out.
I think I hung around him when I was
You did?
small.
You did? Yeah.
And it wasn't right.
I got stuff from big now with the girl that didn't know what else they had. And so I drove around, so we were so I said to him, okay, sure. Yeah, the last picture, Billy and I. And, originally Lauren.
Yeah. So you saw my neighbor.
Yeah, and then I told her about the picture, and I said, Mark, we found my own picture.
Oh.
So I said,
So I do like it.
Followed your neighbor,
Yes.
yeah.
Oh, they followed us.
they followed you.
Yeah.
Freeman. You know, everyone got like Freeman?
No.
They lived in the same.
Oh.
And they just moved in about 6 months after. Probably us, about the same distance we were.
Yeah,
We're at, Lakes of Wood. So,
Yeah, what do you think?
it's got something. Yes.
Mask on, mask off. I lift my voice when all is dark. Into God's hands I place my heart. Biado of kiruchi, I'm not afraid, Adonai li. I lift my eyes when all is night. When I need help, I seek God's light. Lo echsar Adonai roi, I'm not afraid, Adonai li. I shall not want, Adonai li. I've set the eternal always before me. God is at my side. I shall not be moved. Therefore does my heart exult and my soul rejoice. My being is secure. For you will not abandon me to death, nor let your faithful ones see destruction. You show me the path of life. Your presence brings fullness of joy. Enduring happiness is your gift. Adonai roi lo echsar, binodeh sheyarbitzeni al mei menuchot yenahaleni, nafshi shovev yancheni v'maglei tzedek למען שמו, גם כי אלך בגץ על מוות, לא ירא רע כי אתה עמדי, שבטך ומשענתך המה ינחמוני, תערוך לפני שולחן נגד צורריי, תשענת בשמן ראשי, כוסי רוויה, אך טוב וחסד ירדפוני, כל ימי חיי, ושבתי בבית אדוני, לאורך ימים. The 23rd Psalm. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He guideth me in straight paths for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou hast anointed my head with oil. My cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. To Mimi, to Jeffrey and Carla, to Debbie and Jerry, to Jennifer, Kristen, Joshua and Gabriel, to dear relatives, fiancés, dear friends. We join together with you this afternoon to pay our last respects to a cherished husband, an incredible father, a grandfather, M. William Rose. At times like this, questions naturally arise in our minds, questions that trouble us, but to which we despair of ever finding satisfying answers. We are haunted by the questions often left unspoken. What is death? And we ask, why are people whom we love taken from us? And we wonder, why does one person live long years and another die before his time? However, even as we ask, We know that these questions, to which there are no answers, they are problems which were not meant for people to solve. We can only affirm that the life of an individual has had a deep and lasting impression on us, leaving us with memories of years shared, memories that shaped our lives, and experiences that have enabled us to view the world with a different perspective. And so we turn to the sages of our tradition to help us understand and comfort us as we journey through this difficult time of grief and of sadness. The book of Kohelet, Ecclesiastes, tells us, "The day of one's death is greater than the day of one's birth." This statement naturally puzzled the rabbis, for how, they wondered, could the day of one's death possibly be better than the day of one's birth? And one of our sages, Rabbi Levi, explained the verse with this analogy. Imagine, he said, 2 ships laden with merchandise, one coming into port and one going out. However, the people standing on the dock cheered only for the ship that was coming into port. A puzzled spectator asked, "Tell me, why do you cheer the ship coming into port, but not the ship that's going out to sea?" And the rabbi replied, "We are cheering the ship that is coming into the dock, for we know that it went out in peace and that it has returned to port in peace. However, the ship that is now beginning its voyage, who can tell what her fate will be?" Rabbi Levi continued, "And so it is with a person. When a person is born and begins his life's journey, we don't know what sort of life he will live and the nature of his deeds. However, when he has finished his life's journey, it is apparent to all what his life and his deeds were." What better way to recall and remember Bill's life and his journey than to have his family share their memories? Debbie? Yeah.
I'm sure you all know that my father was a sweet, kind, gentle, and loving man. He's one of those people that you always look up to in awe because he always seems to do the right thing. Growing up, there were 3 of us kids, and I remember the weekends were the only time Dad would get to sleep in, so we were under strict orders to be quiet. Imagine 3 little children told to be quiet, because if not, one of them would come stomping downstairs to let us know that we were in trouble. One of my favorite things to do with my father when I was a little girl is I would stand on his feet and he would hold my hands and he'd walk around the room and say boopy doopy, boopy doopy. And of course I would just laugh and laugh and laugh and loved it. And he did that with all of his grandchildren too. We had family outings to Lake Plata, Geauga Lake, Cedar Point, and the bowling alley. Dad used to love to bowl. I don't know if any of you knew that. But he was so serious. He would get in this pose, and it was so, he always had to win. It had to be the perfect pose, and we would be behind him just laughing at him. A high point of my childhood was always going to his office. Now, you think of it, we're little kids, and this guy has this place that has these chairs that go up and down with buttons you push. Can you imagine how fun that is to the kids as a kid? Another thing we used to do is he'd have the syringes. Of course, they didn't have the needles on them. They had a little cap. And we found out that if you pulled the syringe out and put it back in, you could shoot the caps around the room. So we had fond memories of kids doing that. I mean, isn't that what all dentist kids do? Growing up, if you needed him, he was always there. I remember I would call the office if he was with patients. I mean, it would be pretty quick that he would come to the phone. He was always there for us. He was never too busy to talk to you. As I became older in school, I struggled with math, with those word problems. I could never figure those out. He always helped me with that, and he was always so kind and patient. I don't know about you, with math, when you can't understand something, how frustrating that can be. As an adult, I knew I could always go to him with ethical dilemmas. He always guided me down the right path. However, deep down, I always knew what he would say. There was always times where I really didn't want to go down the right path. Sometimes it's easier not to, and I would call Dad, and of course he would tell me what I already knew, but it would help me stay on the right path. My father was an amazing man. He believed in me more than I believed in myself at times. I never would have achieved the level of success that I did if it were not for him. I went back to school as an adult to get my master's degree in psychology, and my dad was like, "Are you going to go get your PhD?" And I said, "Dad, we have 2 kids that are teenagers, that we've been saving for college. I don't know that we have the extra income to do that." And he said, "I'll tell you what, you get into the program and I'll pay for half of it." So how could I turn down an offer like that? So thank you, Dad, in helping me reach my potential. Of course, he was the perfect person to talk to as I started my own psychology private practice and taught a few college courses myself. Dad loved what he did career-wise. He practiced well beyond retirement age. Teaching was also his passion. He taught well into his 80s. He also appeared to be loved by his students. There would be times where we'd be visiting and we'd go out to dinner, and one of his students would come up to the table and say what a great man he was, or how he helped them throughout his career, or he was a mentor. Dad shared a story with me once about a student that was pregnant. This one he was teaching, and I guess she had her baby on the day of the final. So she called Dad to find out about making it up, and he said, "Didn't you know that if you have your baby on the day of a final, you don't have to take the final?" So it was a pass-fail course. She was obviously already passing. But what compassion and flexibility. I mean, how many professors do you know that would really say, "That's okay, you don't have to take the final"? Okay. Another funny story I'd like to share. My husband Jerry and I, at the time we were dating, and he needed his wisdom teeth out, so he took them out. And then afterwards he called and said, "Should I send him a bill?" And I said, "I don't know." And I said, "I have an idea. If he dumps me, Dad, then send him the bill." So I guess he had to marry me so he wouldn't pay that bill. So, okay. As you can see, he loved his bonsai trees. He has nurtured trees like this for as long as I can remember. As a matter of fact, when I got married 36 years ago, I took a clipping of ivy from one of his bonsai trees, or a couple clippings, and it was in my wedding bouquet. After I got married, I, made clippings of that and replanted them and have kept them going. And my children, who have just once been married a little over a year and another almost 3, some ivy went into their wedding bouquet. So it's lasted all these years. So it's been a wonderful little family tradition we have. I have just a few more paragraphs, so don't worry, it's not going to be too long. After all the kids got married and moved away, Mom and Dad would come visit. He adored his grandchildren. You could see how his eyes would light up when he would see them, and he had a true desire to get to know each of them on an individual basis. The last time we saw him, my daughters and I had come to visit in early November. Our last memory of him is all playing cards. He was still with it then, and wouldn't you know, he was still winning at cards, even at 91 years old. We are blessed, as there was nothing left unsaid. I love my father dearly. He will be incredibly missed. However, he made me who I am today, and a piece of him will always be in my soul. I love you, Daddy.
Wow, what a hard act to follow. That was beautiful, Deb. Really, family, really, what else is there? That's what Dad would say. He cherished my mother. About 3-4 years ago, I was in the car with Dad, just him and I. We were on our way to a stamp show. And I said to Dad, we were at a red light, and I said to Dad, Dad, how soon after meeting Mom did you know that she was the one for you? And he looked at me in the eyes with a big smile and beaming, said, oh, right away, Jeffrey. You know, I dated a lot when I was young, and I had never met anybody like your mother. And what he means is that she's fun, she's funny, she's unique, she's classy, she laughs a lot, she's a hoot. And he just cherished her. Mom always came first. You know, if there was ever any disparity between her wishes and us, he always sided with Mom. You know, and Deb and I would say, oh, did you get the hairy eyeball? He would give us a look, and that's all he had to do. Many years ago, we were all together for Thanksgiving, and I'm up at the computer upstairs, and Dad says to me, Jeff, you were a little disrespectful to your mother. Remember, honor thy mother and father. And that's all Dad had to do, is something like that. Mom and Dad would kiss in the elevator. You guys might want to ask her why. About 3-4 years ago, Dad said to me, take care of your mother. Those were the words his father said to him before he passed. And that made me worry, and I found that I was coming to Cleveland here every 2 or 3 months. And my sister hit the nail on the head. She says, you're worried it's going to be the last time you see him. And I was. We spent so much quality time together that I have no regrets. I saw him often. He was always available on the phone. We talked at least every week. And as Deb said, he was always there for his family. You know, he had a private number at his practice, at his office. And if that number rang, or he either answered it or one of his nurses did, it was right away. They were directed that if a family member called, he was to be interrupted. I mean, think about it. He'd interrupt surgery to answer the phone and take as much time as we wanted. It was just incredible. A fabulous family man that always made time for us. You know, if we called up and we talked to him and we weren't sure what to do, he'd ask him, and he'd say things like, well, what do you think you should do? He really didn't answer our questions very often. He got us to answer our questions and issues ourselves. And Mom and Dad always told us when we were young, if you have any question what the right thing to do is, just think, what would your mother and father do? And just a wonderful, wonderful man. He loved us all unconditionally. No matter what had occurred, no matter what, he always loved us. We all talked to him every week. Whatever our interests were, he helped us pursue those. You know, bowling, stamp collecting, my electronics that I was involved with, I remember going to these ham radio shows as a youngster, and Dad would drive me to Dayton, Ohio, or Youngstown, or wherever these were, to help support my interests. Dad always took the high road. He always did the right thing. I remember going to Corky and Lenny's in Cleveland Heights on the Cedar Center, and I remember once the person in front of me dropped a quarter, and I let the person leave, and then I picked it up. And I said, Dad, they dropped this quarter. And he says, go give that back to him. So he made me run down the sidewalk and give that back to him. There's another story of us going to the drugstore. And we got home, and Dad would often check the receipt. He checks the receipt, and he realized, he says, we have to go back to the store. We went back to the store, and they charged him the wrong amount. They didn't charge him enough. And Dad said, well, we owe him this. This isn't right. And so we went back to the store to give him some more money. Dad always kept his word. You know, just several years ago, he said to me, you know, Jeff, people say they're going to do things, and a lot of times they don't. He always under-promised and over-delivered. If he wouldn't say something unless he's sure that he could come through. My daughter Gabby talked to him on the phone last week and said, we'll see you in February. And I talked to him about that I had heard that Gabby had said that. And he says, yeah, I told her I wasn't sure about that. Such a wonderful man. There was another time where early on in my business ventures, I started a business in the basement of my folks' house at about age 12. And I learned the lessons of business the hard way. There was one transaction where it was the largest transaction I was involved with, and my customer declared bankruptcy on me. I mean, how can you cheat a kid? Well, this guy did, and I had bought the merchandise or the electronic components on credit, and so I owed somebody the money. And this man knew my father, and he called up my father, and my father said, he'll pay you back. And my dad wouldn't solve your problems for you, but he lets you solve them in a respectful and courteous manner. Dad was a very welcoming person. My soon-to-be son-in-law wrote me a beautiful message a few days ago, and he said, you know, your father was so warm and welcoming, and I'll never forget that smile. My wife said the same thing when she met him for the first time. When we walked in the door at our house on Eaton Road, this is back in 2010, 12 years ago, my dad looked her in the eyes, took her hand and said, I'm so glad you came. And she talks about that all the time. She talks about his warmth and how welcoming and what a great person he is. He always treated everybody with respect. You always felt good about yourself after you had an interaction with my father. He never wanted us to worry. You know, as we're going through the house, and we see all of his, you know, his clothes and his jewelry, and that Mom says, "Do you want any of his suits? Do you want any of his jackets?" And I say no, because I could never fulfill his shoes. He was a perfect gentleman. He was an amazing man, the greatest gentleman I know. Rest in peace, Dad.
Thank you so much for sharing your stories and your words, your memories. We know in Judaism that the soul does not go to heaven right away. It really takes quite a long time. And each time you share a story or you mention a story to this family or you talk about your beloved one, his soul, his neshama, becomes more elevated. Each time, elevated and elevated. And that's our goal. That's how his memory and his soul continues to live within us and with us. It goes down through the generations. I just wasn't sure, Deb, when does the dentist chair become not fun? At what age?
It's when your grandchildren become when your children become your age. So you keep playing until your kids are old enough.
Because it's not something I ever really would like that much. But thank you for sharing that really beautiful stories, and I so appreciate that. Your dad, your husband, your grandfather, Bill, was a true and compassionate professional. He excelled in his medical field, not only with his patients, but with his colleagues, and as a professor to his students at Case Western Reserve. He was also a lifelong learner himself, a history buff even in his retirement. He attended classes at Tri-C in the Senior Scholars Program. He was a family man, as you mentioned, and he was a wonderful, wonderful, loving husband. He put all of you before himself. I know that, Jeff, you mentioned, and I would like to just repeat that when he set his eyes on Mary Ann Rosenberg in 1955, it was a blind date setup. He knew he would marry her. He was smitten, love at first sight, and this love that you created then grew and flourished throughout your 66 years of marriage together. Bill was also a magical genie. Whatever Mimi's wishes were, he granted them. Bill was an artist and a nurturer. He nurtured these loving children. He set them up well on a course for life. He taught them fairness and equity and the value of your word. He nurtured his own body and his mind with exercise, swimming, and now I know bowling, and meditation. Bill was a non-judgmental peacemaker. He stood up for his convictions, but when conflicts arose, he made peace the priority. But most of all, and the most important of all, Bill was a mensch. He was a quiet, soft-spoken, humble, and intelligent man of high morals and very, very strict ethics. And while we feel a great sense of loss at his passing, we can find that the memory of his life lives on after him and testifies to the sort of person that he was. No more eloquent eulogy and no better summary of his life can be given than to say that his family considered themselves blessed because he was their husband and father and grandfather, a dear relative, and their best friend. Zichrono livracha, We say to you, Bill, may your memory always be a blessing to all of us. Amen. I'd like to conclude with a beautiful poem. In the rising of the sun and in its going down, we will remember him. In the blowing of the wind and in the chill of winter, we will remember him. In the opening of buds and in the rebirth of spring, we remember him. In the rustling of leaves and in the beauty of autumn, we remember him. In the beginning of the year and when it ends, we remember him. When we are weary and in need of strength, we remember him. When we are lost and sick at heart, we are going to remember him. Most importantly, when we have joys that we want to share, we will certainly remember him. So long as we live, he too shall live, for he is a part of all of us as we remember him. Adonai Natan ve'Adonai Lakach, Yehi Shem Adonai Mevorach. God has given, God has taken away. Blessed be the name of God. If you are able to rise at this time for the El Malei Rachamim prayer. El Malei Rachamim, Shochen Mamromim, Hametzeh Menucha Nechona, Tachat Kanfei Shechina, Im Kedoshim Utehorim, Kezohar Harakia Mazirim, Et Nishmat Yosef Ben Zev Shehalach Le'olamo, Bal Rachamim Yastirehu Beseta Kanafav Le'olamim, Bitzro Chaim Et Nishmato, Adonai Hu Nachalato, V'yanuach B'shalom Al Mishkavo, V'nomar Amen. Compassionate God, eternal Spirit of the universe, grant perfect rest in your sheltering presence to M. William Rose, son of Philip and Gussie, who has entered eternity. O God of mercy, let him find refuge in the shadow of your wings, and let his soul be bound up in the bond of everlasting life. God is his inheritance. May he rest in peace. And let us all say, Amen. That concludes our service here. We continue at Lakeview Cemetery.
first, right?
Maybe that's what I
We can put them in your name. Okay. Take the cards out. The cards will be with the register. Okay? All behind the casket. Yeah. This way. And you're going to go to the right. And you're careful not to go in your cards there. Okay? Okay, friends, on behalf of the family, thank you for attending the service. If you're going to the cemetery, we ask that you return to your cars, put on your headlights and your flashers and your heaters, please. Okay? Those who are not may also return to their cars. You want to take all your coats? Huh? Yeah, that one's good. Yeah.
If she does, Polly, I'll take you home.
Thank you.
I love having that bonsai and then looking at this behind it.
Wasn't that wonderful?
Yeah. Oh my goodness, look at the sun.
I know.
Yeah, but that's the end place.
Oh, I see.
That's I'm driving out the end. It says exit.
No, she means the driving. Polly's referring